So hi everybody, thanks for being with us today. My name is Minglu Chen. A lot of you, I think, haven't met me. I'm a senior lecturer of the discipline of government and international relations here at the University of Sydney. I'm also an executive member of the China Studies Center. It is my great pleasure to serve as the chair today, and it's really good to see you again, Sabrina. So I would like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I am currently based and also where the China Studies Center of the university is located, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future, and I extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples on this land. So let me take several minutes to introduce our guest today, Professor Sabrina Habish-Salbigala, who is Professor for State and Society of Modern China at the Institute of China Studies at Free University Berlin. Her research focuses on China's rural and urban governance, as well as central, local, and state society relations in China. She is the author of the book Dams, Migration, and Authoritarianism in China, the Local State in Yunnan, published by Routledge. Her work has also been published in many high-impact academic journals, such as World Development and the China Quarterly. Today, Sabrina is going to share with us her research titled Infrastructures of Control and Service, Reforming Grassroots Governance in Beijing. I think Sabrina will speak for 35 to 40 minutes. Then we will open the floor for questions from the audience. And also, I want to remind you, if you have a question, can you please not use the chat function, but enter your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So Sabrina, thank you so much for making yourself available for us at such a very early time in Germany. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Minglu. Thank you for having me here at this webinar to present my research on, as you already mentioned, infrastructures of control and service, innovations of grassroots governance in Beijing. So this is the rundown of the presentation today. And first of all, hello everyone in the audience from Berlin. I should also greet everyone and for making, and I'm very happy that you are interested in this topic and then you are making yourself available as well to listen to what I have to say. So the rundown of the presentation is as follows. I'm going to present the problems that the central party state in Beijing perceives as the most urgent ones in terms of governing China more generally and in terms of urban governance more specifically. And then I'm going to present 3 solutions that have been put out there in Beijing, but also increasingly in other cities and even the countryside in China to solve these perceived problems. These are what I call 2 infrastructures and 1 mechanism. So grid cell social management, some of you may already have heard about this, is kind of an infrastructure, as well as the online service request system. The whistleblowing mechanism, you will hear in a moment what it is all about, is more like a mechanism. And then I will conclude and reflect on what this means with regards to governing in China more generally, and especially also intergovernmental relations. So what is actually the problem? The rapid expansion of Chinese cities, of course, is putting immense pressure on infrastructure, housing, and public services in Chinese cities. Governance systems are strained to meet the needs of increasingly large and diverse population. A huge inflow of migrant population has taken place in many cities in China. In Beijing, the city's identity as the political capital and also the organization of spectacular events like the Beijing Olympics present additional factors that causes the city leadership to think carefully about how to control the city best. All of these problems are being addressed by what Trevasquez and Lin in a recent publication in Modern China have called a regime of activities, namely Safe China. These activities, they explain, integrate social governance and public order to create long-lasting social order and stability. According to Trevasquez and Lin, this regime of activities is comprehensive in the sense that it includes various functional departments, including police, emergency services, environmental protection agencies, and so forth. In that it controls the population and provides services at the same time. The authors write that Safe China has moved the ideological dial, I'm quoting, from fragmented to comprehensive governance. But what does that actually mean in practice when we think about the fragmentation of Chinese governance along horizontal and vertical lines? How exactly are these programs wired in the background? What I would like to show here today is how these three mechanisms or solutions that can all be subsumed under Xi Jinping's Safe China regime are adjusting existing bureaucratic structures. Hence, I would like to look a little bit more behind the scenes and move away from official policy stipulations to the more nitty-gritty bureaucratic wires that belong to these programs. This perspective sheds a little bit more light on whether these programs can actually be successful and what they mean for the individuals implementing them. And while doing so, I would like to address another problem of governance in China that seems to be an important target of Safe China reforms, but that has so far not been addressed under this banner, namely the overburdening of local bureaucracies. So rapid urbanization has increased the demands on local bureaucracies, particularly in Beijing and other major cities. And these local governments struggle to meet the needs of growing urban populations while managing also their expanded workloads. And this is related to yet another governance challenge that the leadership faces, namely how to improve oversight over local cadres and thus increase the so-called tiao control, the vertical control, and at the same time ensure that local governments serve the interests of the people, ultimately bolstering regime legitimacy. I argue that these solutions that I'm going to present seek to square this circle by providing the necessary material and immaterial infrastructure to centralize control without jeopardizing social stability. Or to frame it with Huang Yasheng's recent words, to manage the tension between homogeneity and heterogeneity, or between scale and scope. So I think I don't need to give you an introduction to the concept of fragmented authoritarianism, but just let me say this. For a long time, fragmented authoritarianism has worked quite well in China, with the advantages being flexibility in policy implementation, local experimentation, and policy innovation. However, this bureaucratic system also has a number of disadvantages. The bureaucratic system that, that differentiates between vertical control and gives a lot of control to the horizontal level. That leads also to a lack of coordination between central and local authorities, slow decision making, and also slow enforcement at times. And my key argument, looking at these three solutions that I've studied over the past few years, is that these three solutions are supposed to rewire these tiao kuai, like vertical and horizontal relations, to better serve the goals of higher levels of government and extend the role of the party in grassroots governance. I'm not arguing that fragmented authoritarianism is no longer existing or that the current leadership is abolishing it altogether. But what we are seeing is a rewiring of these vertical and horizontal relations, especially at the grassroots and local level, to retain the flexibility and local adaptability of fragmented authoritarianism while reducing the coordination failures and policy enforcement weaknesses. At the same time, I argue that this rewiring is not confined to the bureaucratic relations that we see on these pictures between government departments and levels referred to as leadership and guiding relations, but it rather encompasses the creation of new tools, infrastructures, digital infrastructures that contribute to this rewiring. And now let me move to these solutions. The first one being grid-style social management. I'm sure that many of you have heard about this before because it's all the rage at the moment and over the past few years in the scientific literature. That was first pioneered already in 2004 in Beijing's Dongcheng district, and it refers to the geographic division of cities and recently also the countryside into grids, each of which comprise 300 to 500 households. In urban China, a grid is usually made up of a residential compound, and in rural areas, one village or small group constitutes one grid. Just to give you an idea of what's going on in the background, I show you here a graph of China's system of local governance before the introduction of the grid. So the lowest organizational component being at the grassroots level, being the shichu level, the community level, which are territorially based on residential compounds. And above, you have the different layers of street, township, and district county governments. And below, you have the population. Nowadays, with the grids included, the graph of local grassroots governance looks like this. So this difference clearly shows how the local structures of the party state have expanded significantly with the introduction of the grids. The details of the structure, of course, they can vary from place to place, but it broadly looks like this. And here you can see the grids at the very bottom of the administrative structure, but they don't constitute an administrative level, but they're rather a layer or platform through which grassroots officials collect information and provide services. They collect information on the population. The administration of each grid is assigned to a grid service team that is composed of city and village officials, police officers, teachers, community doctors, different types of people. And the grid chief is recruited from community party organizations. So that person has to be a party member. The most important task of these grid members is to patrol the grids regularly, about twice a day, at least during the pandemic. Talk to the residents and identify and solve potential problems in the community. All information gathered during these patrols is supposed to be recorded in a work diary, and problems that can only be solved by higher levels of government. They are reported upwards via a web application. And in addition to collecting this information through patrols, grid managers are supposed to have access to a local database that provides them with information on individual households and population statistics. So, and this digital structure is complemented by a physical network of offices and teams located in the community, in the shichu offices. In this diagram here, this digital structure is represented on the, not here, but here on the left-hand side, by the information control rooms in which all information is collected and can be accessed by grid employees. The different tasks that grids must perform are illustrated through these different platforms here: comprehensive work, market surveillance, and so forth. Each of these platforms is led by a cadre at the township level. You can see that here as well. And each grid is responsible for each of the tasks. So it's in each grid, you have comprehensive service and supervision tasks, and township leaders are responsible for their implementation. Now, this is the ideal version of how grids are supposed to work in the party state's rationale, of course. but it gives you an idea about how structures have changed and just gotten more polluted in a sense since before the grids. So what does that system have to do with how governance works at the grassroots level in Chinese cities more generally, in terms of the rewiring of these horizontal and vertical relations? We see a combination of vertical control and horizontal coordination still. One township leader is responsible for each grid. That's the vertical control here. By controlling a township governor, higher levels of government can also implement certain policies more effectively. And to ensure that township leader is the one that ensures that functional departments at the township level cooperate to solve problems on a horizontal level. Of course, the digital platforms function as instruments for vertical control and potentially also horizontal coordination when people can access information and coordinate that. But most importantly, digital platforms are a tool of control. You might ask, what's the role of the party in all of that? Well, that's quite interesting. Grid leaders have to be party members. That's that. But the initial goal was actually also to increase the role of the party by establishing party groups within each grid. But that hasn't worked out so well so far, because there are not enough party members to form these groups, and then sometimes party members are just put into certain party groups without actually knowing that they are part of these groups. And these party groups are not really overseen by higher level party organizations, so there is not really an intensive control on the side of the party, although that was also one of the original intentions. But at the government level, we at least see a certain kind of rewiring. Now let's move on to solution 2. That is somewhat also connected. Of course, it is connected to grid-style social management. This mechanism here, whistleblowing, it directly responds to some of the problems that grid-style social management had. Namely, I'm having all these grid workers and they detect all these problems and report them upwards. But how do I ensure that upper levels also respond and help solve the reported problems, especially in cases where frontline workers cannot solve the problems on their own, and because there are many of them, because frontline workers do not have any law enforcement capabilities. And that mechanism originated in Pinggu district in Beijing in 2016, when 6 illegal gold miners were killed in a gold mining accident. And that gold mining is illegal in Beijing already since 2004. But since 2004, there have been repeated accidents, and this bigger accident in 2016 led to the death of 6 people. So it basically showed that since 2004, nobody has really implemented this mining ban at all. And that accident caught the attention of the municipal level, and they ordered the district to solve that. And the district then came up with a so-called whistleblowing mechanism that is now implemented all over Beijing. So what is this mechanism about? It seeks to improve the responsiveness of higher levels of government towards problems that are reported from below. So in this case, it's the district governments that have to report to the township levels, and their goal was to increase law enforcement abilities of the street and township level in Beijing. And that is being done in several ways. So first, the mechanism requires districts to quickly respond to requests for help by the street and township level, as pictured on the right-hand side here, where a township representative blows the whistle and district government departments run to help. And they don't help individually, but ideally in a coordinated way through a so-called interdepartmental command center that you see here at the district level that coordinate the response to the street and township level. Also, the reforms established comprehensive law enforcement teams at the township level, staffed with representatives from the district, from a higher level, that have law enforcement authority. Although the personnel formally belongs to the district level, the street and township level coordinates and even evaluates their work, and can even request their dismissal. In turn, these street and townships, they send so-called community commissioners down to the lower level. They oversee and support the work of Shichu community staff. So what does that mechanism do in terms of the rewiring that I was talking about? It restructures the vertical and horizontal relationship by enabling a vertical escalation of local issues, with township levels officials being able to request help and also evaluate the law enforcement team that are sent down. So usually street officials have no say over these higher levels officials, of course. So the top-down system is partly turned upside down. At the horizontal level, we have that interdepartmental command center that deals with complex problems that a single department cannot handle by themselves. And now let's move on to the third solution, because about 1 year after the whistleblowing mechanism was introduced citywide, that was in 2018, it was introduced all over Beijing. In 2019, that system received an upgrade. So on the left-hand side here, you see the original whistleblowing mechanism that is still present, and it's here in that graph. Now, streets and township, they still blow the whistle when they see a problem, but now Beijing citizens are systematically introduced into that mechanism, which is now referred to as 解诉急办, a service complaint system. It originates actually in Los Angeles, but that's another story. So in that system, citizens file requests through a hotline, a 24-hour telephone hotline, or through an online platform or a WeChat mini program. The hotline is operated by the municipal level. That's important. And then once they file, they report a problem, it's reported by the citizen hotline at the municipal level. The citizen hotline dispatches the work order to the responsible street and township level, and they decide, can I solve the problem on my own? If yes, then I do that. If I can't solve the problem on my own, I blow the whistle for the district level and ask them to help. And what is even more important in all of this is the continuous performance evaluation, and that's done at the municipal party level. So this whole system, we'll go through this in much more detail in a moment, but to give you just a broad overview, this whole system relies on digitalization, these performance assessments, and also, of course, a standardization to actually make this all efficient, because you can imagine how many calls the citizen hotline receives. I remember that one day in my fieldwork data, there were almost 12,000 calls to that hotline on a single day. So this system has to work quite efficiently to give the population a sense of meaningfulness. So this all started with the categorization of citizen requests. And that was done at the municipal level, where they could categorize citizen requests to quickly identify both the urgency of each complaint that comes in and also the responsible actors within the government and public service bureaucracy to solve the matter. Requests are classified according to their types and specific contents, as you can see here is just an example. Altogether, there are 3 levels. So you have, at the broadest level, 41 categories. One of them is epidemic prevention and control. Then at the more detailed level, there are 435 categories, I'm sorry. And then at the very detailed level, more than 2,000 categories. And for each type of task, responsible departments are designated, and also the response times with which these tasks need to be handled. And these response times, they range from 2 hours in case of an emergency. That means not that you're sending like a fire truck after 2 hours. No, it means that within 2 hours, that whole problem has to be solved and a report has to be written and submitted to the municipal level. That's emergency. And then this can lead to up to 30 days for complex issues that are stipulated as very complex and non-emergency. In between there, some of the requests have to be handled within 7 days, and then up to 30 days. Let's look at how exactly this process of handling such a complaint looks like. I'm showing you here a translation of a screenshot of the software that is used within Beijing to handle complaints. And I remember the first step was the reception of the complaint. The second step was assigning the task to the street or township level within a district. And then the third step was handling the complaint. They have to handle the complaint. And then the final step is the feedback and the evaluation. And we are going through this now. So this graph here provides details on the channel through which the request was originally received. It was through that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hotline. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5热线. Oh, that's actually in place all over China. And the staff member of the hotline, of course, that's all anonymized. I made up these names. But I retained the timing. It's a different date, but I retained the timing between reception and handling of the complaint, just to give you an idea. So the staff member of the hotline that is located at the municipal level receives the call and then records the name of the complainant. And then there is also some additional information from that complaint we can see here. So that's Mr. Wang, and he has several telephone numbers listed too, and he called from this one number and actually from this number. And then also he called before, apparently as well, he called twice, and this is all recorded. And then in the second step, we have the detail about which kind of request was launched by Mr. Wang. So that happened, the call was on November 2, 2021 at 10:02 a.m. The handling of the request gets automatically after that assigned to the township representatives where the problem had been observed. In this case, that was garbage dumping. You can see that all here. The topic is garbage dumping. There was garbage in front of a factory gate, repeatedly already observed. Don't know who it was, so there's no reported person. We don't know who is here the perpetrator. And then where was that exactly, and what kind of classification is that problem, according to the classification that we saw before. Mr. Wang called at 10:02, and according to our data, just 5 minutes later, on the same day, 5 minutes later, the information about the request showed up at in the township level, who see, okay, there's a request coming in, and then these representatives confirmed the receipt at 10:11. So only 9 minutes after Mr. Wang originally called. They confirm, okay, I've received the request, I'm going to handle it. The information provided to the township is displayed here as well. So they receive this information. Then what is interesting here as well, the hotline staffer not only types in the information, but also tags. He tags or she tags the problem according to, okay, is it COVID-19? Is it an emergency? And all of these things. But what is interesting here is also they can tag policy priorities. So if it's COVID-19, it has a certain priority, and we will learn about what that means later. And then in this case, it was about 7 guarantees and 5 qualities. It's a policy by the combined policy by the Party Congress and also the Beijing municipal government that want to improve livability in cities. So garbage dumping, they immediately classify this as part of this policy, which is, of course, quite convenient because it allows the government to directly link their work in Jiasujiban with the fulfillment of these goals. They can quantify to what extent this they have fulfilled these goals of livability in the 7 guarantees. And then, what we see here as well is on this slide is an attached audio file at the bottom of a phone call by Eternal Township, who received that request and who have to handle it. They call the complainant and have to talk to them and tell them, okay, we've received the complaint and we are handling it now. Thank you very much. Over. That's all recorded and uploaded to the system, very transparent. This graph here then depicts how it was all handled, what happened then. So the township sent some representatives to the site. They confirmed, yes, there's garbage. Okay, we clear the garbage, and we also install some CCTV so that doesn't happen again, because it repeatedly happens. And then it also, this is a report, right, that was later written about all of this process. That report was written by somebody at the municipal level, again, from the hotline staff, based, of course, on the report that the street level submitted. And the street level also reported, the handling result has been communicated to the caller, who expressed satisfaction with the resolution at 1 minute 36 seconds. So that attachment that is uploaded of the call, also you can go to 1 minute 36 seconds and then hear Mr. Wang saying, yes, I'm satisfied, thank you. This is basically not the final stage, but the stage of when the request has been handled, and then Mr. Wang needs to be called again. So previously it was the township calling him, saying, we've handled it. And now it is the municipal level calling Mr. Wang again with a previously, with a script. And that script is previously determined. Mr. Wang's name is added, and also the garbage dumping issue is added, and then they can just read from that script and ask him if he was called before, if that was successful, if the complaint has been resolved, and how happy he is with the complaint handling. Interestingly here, look at it before. Before, when the township called, at 1 minute 36 seconds, Mr. Wang said, I'm happy. At 1 minute 41 seconds, they expressed great satisfaction. So probably the township then asks, you're only satisfied, or are you very satisfied? And then Mr. Wang said, yeah, I'm very satisfied, Okay, but then later when the municipal level calls, they just entered satisfied. Maybe that's just, a tiny difference when you look at it now, but let's see what happens with satisfied and very satisfied. This is the evaluation of how local governments are evaluated as part of the system. And they are evaluated based on how timely they respond, how timely they click, yes, I've received the request. And that took them, I think it was 9 minutes, right? And so you receive already 20%. And the resolution rate is 40%, which is quite high. And then the satisfaction rate is also very high. So in between very satisfied and satisfied as part of this, there's 20%. And if you are evaluated, and this counts for your future career, then that's quite a bit, because we will see in a moment what they do with these evaluations as well. But let me first add a very interesting aspect as well, because during the COVID-19 pandemic, these 3 rates were a little bit different. So during COVID-19, the response rate was 40%, it counted much higher, whereas the satisfaction rate of the citizens was lower, only 20%. So during COVID-19, it didn't matter so much if people were happy or not, it just had to be done. Now, after that, after COVID-19 is over and we mostly have other daily requests, that switched. And it's more about the happiness of the citizens. So what we can see here is that the Tiesujiban actually allows the municipal government to flexibly adjust policy priorities and ensure their implementation. Of course, that was already possible through annual cadre evaluations, but Tiesujiban does evaluations daily and monthly. And therefore, it allows for ad hoc changes in case of certain priority events. And this is, I'm sorry for the bad quality, but it just, you will get the point when I explain it to you. These are so-called citizen hotline reports that are sent on a daily basis to the municipal party, so to the Beijing party secretary, for him to see which townships and districts are ranked high and which ones are ranked low in these performance evaluations. So that is quite a big deal, because if there are 12,000 calls a day, that probably it changes all the time, but it makes quite a bit of difference whether Mr. Wang ticks satisfied or very satisfied, because all of them are ranked according to digits, many digits after the comma, and only tiny differences in terms of these evaluation results make a huge difference in terms of the listing, because the party secretary is only interested in the first 10 streets and townships and the last 10 streets and townships. And these last 10 streets and townships get a lot of pressure from the higher levels, because nobody wants to be ranked low. So what we hear from these street officials, they are frequently there. We had this one official who had to speak to different leaders within the district in 1 week for 6 times. They were invited by their superiors to talk about the bad performance evaluations that they get, and they were just a tiny bit below much higher ranked streets. But because of that performance evaluations, a tiny difference between, for example, satisfied, not satisfied, accepting the request 1 or 2 minutes later than others did, goes a great deal towards these performance evaluations. So what does that all have to do with that rewiring that I was talking about? As the name of the mechanism already indicates, the novel aspect of Tiesujiban was that citizen requests now had to be handled more quickly and efficiently. If you don't want citizens to lose confidence in your problem-solving capabilities and stop calling the hotline, then you better solve citizen problems efficiently. And this works best in Beijing's eyes through standardization, digitalization, and performance assessments. And all of this increases vertical control. In terms of horizontal coordination, local government officials, we talked about this already at district and the township levels. They collaborate to solve service requests, but they must, of course, adhere to very centralized performance metrics and timelines. What we can also see is that we have a lot of central oversight in terms of the evaluations. We have streamlined accountability, because local officials are held accountable to both their immediate superiors and also these digital metrics. We have much reduced autonomy. Despite handling service requests, local officials have not much discretion because these data-driven metrics shape how they respond to problems. And the flexibility that we've seen before at the grassroots level moves upwards towards the municipal level, where they classify the requests and can also flexibly change the policy focus. I think I'm almost up with my time, so I'm moving towards, this is just a comparative table of these three solutions. I'm not going to go into detail. Let's look at my final conclusion. So all these three solutions that I showed you today, they combine service provision with control. But we hear a lot, we heard this argument before, also by Travascus and Lin, for example, but it's not necessarily always control about citizens. It is also, in these cases, control over grassroots officials and local officials, very much. By tightening party control and streamlining these vertical and horizontal interactions, the CCP aims to manage local governments more effectively without sacrificing decentralization. And this rewiring also allows the party state to respond more quickly in times of certain crisis events, as you could see with the performance evaluations, with the tagging of these certain requests. It also allows the government to collect much more data about local governance and to deliver performance legitimacy to the populace. What we have seen here in the form of Tiesudziban more specifically is an instrument to allow for as much scale and scope as necessary, in the words of Huang. So to maintain large-scale uniformity in governance responsiveness while managing the challenges of scope, like heterogeneity in the, this vast and diverse population, for example. This is what the government is mostly afraid of, diversity and heterogeneity. Tiesudziban acts as a scaling tool with a unique purpose to project the government's responsiveness across a vast and diverse population. By addressing complaints quickly and uniformly, it promotes an image of proactive governance, signaling to citizens that the state is attentive and responsive. And the system's design reflects the CCP drive for homogeneity, I would argue, very much. And responsiveness is tightly managed to prevent local variances from challenging the central narrative or authority. And the scope within Tiesudziban, as I just mentioned, primarily rests with the municipal leadership and only partly with these hotline staffers who exercise limited frontline form of discretion by categorizing the requests and then also determining the most suitable department or action. But ultimately, the scope rests with the municipal leadership that steers policy implementation through the categorization of requests and the adjustments of the performance evaluations. And with this, I want to finish. Thank you.